She's like a sickness in my brain, a vision standing by the window pane. She ripples through the blinds and leaves me in a daze. It's in the way her body moves me, the way she grabs me and intoxicates, until the signals in my mind forget to operate. Pressure in your fragile skull. I take my pleasure from my alcohol. She'll never give you any time at all. She just comes and goes, you know. And she's got me living in a chemical love. And I try to find the strength to know when she comes back to me again. I'm gonna come up from a hiding.
Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another coffee and crime time. And let me tell you, it feels good to say that. It feels good to be back. I've been gone for an entire month. Some of you didn't even know that I was taking the month of January off and you were just like, where the hell did Stephanie go? She abandoned us. I didn't. I never would. I'm here. I just needed a break to get some things done and to gather my thoughts. Did I get as much done as I wanted to? Did I get as much done as I planned to? Nope. But I expected that. I had grand plans. I had plans to clean and organize my entire house. Didn't do that. I did the bathroom drawers, so success. That's the most we could. Oh, I had plans to read an entire book. Did I do that? No, I read 2 chapters, but hey, I mean progress. I had plans to do a lot of things that I didn't do, but I will say that I did do enough work where I have 3 videos lined up already for this month, so it's going to be a very good content-packed month because I do have a lot to make up for you for abandoning you for a month, right? So let's just dive in. And the case we're talking about today is currently developing, but it's crazy. It's crazy. Every time new information comes out, it becomes more of a mystery. And honestly, at this point, I've been following it for a couple weeks now, and we need to put our heads together and figure out what we think happened here. Because truth be told, the whole thing is very strange and doesn't totally add up. I keep going back and forth. Like, I feel like I'm getting gaslit by this case because my gut instinct is like, something's not right here. There's definitely something that we're missing, and it could be completely innocent. It could be completely benign, but it feels like there's something that we're missing, and it feels like we don't have all of the details, and it feels like the details we don't have are quite important. But then I'm like, no, this can't be as nefarious as it seems. It's totally innocent. This guy didn't do anything wrong. He's just being, grilled by the media and accused by the public at this point. And then I start to feel bad that I even thought it could be something nefarious to begin with. But then my gut instinct kicks back in and that little pit in your stomach is like, no, something's not right here. So honestly, it's kind of crazy, and I cannot wait to hear what you think about all of this. Okay, brief synopsis. On January 7th, 2024, 3 men went to the home of a friend that they had known for years to watch the Kansas City Chiefs football game. 2 days later, those same 3 men were found dead outside of that very same house, and the man, their friend, who's renting the house, claims he has no idea what happened or how his friends ended up in the position that they were found in on January 9th, which was pretty much like dead and frozen outside of his house. 1 guy was on the porch and 2 guys were in the yard. It's crazy, okay? So, and this guy, the friend who rented the house, he's like, I don't know anything about this. And yes, I was home for 2 full days while they sat out there dead in my yard, but I didn't see them. And I didn't see any messages from their friends and family members asking me where they were for 2 days. And I didn't hear anybody banging on my door looking for them. I was asleep for 48 hours and I have no idea what happened, right? This is what we're going into right now. So we have a lot to talk about today. And before we do, let's have a quick word from the sponsor of today's video, HelloFresh. Get mouth-watering seasonal recipes and fresh, pre-measured ingredients delivered right to your door with HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. HelloFresh makes cooking at home fun, easy, and affordable without stressful trips to the grocery store or meal planning. Whether your resolution this new year is to save money, to eat better, or to stress less, HelloFresh has you covered. You can say hello to your most delicious year yet with fresh ingredients and chef-crafted recipes at a price you'll like, conveniently delivered right to you. The best part is, each HelloFresh box is packed with farm-fresh ingredients and everything arrives pre-portioned, so you're only going to get exactly what you need for each recipe, and this is going to make cleanup super easy. Plus, there isn't any food waste, which, to be honest, is a huge selling point for me. I hate wasting food. I hate buying a whole bag of shredded cheese and then using a cup of it and then not using it for anything else and it going to waste. I hate it. I don't know why. It must come from my modest upbringing, but any food waste is painful for me. But with HelloFresh, I love that not only are these meals easy and fun to prepare because you get these recipe cards with step-by-step instructions and pictures, but there's so much variety, so we never get bored. You can dig into HelloFresh's biggest menu yet with over 45 dinner options to choose from each week, and even more market add-on items that suit any lifestyle. And I honestly feel like the HelloFresh market does not get enough respect. But I spend a lot of time browsing through there. I'm honestly more of a snacker than a full meal eater, so it's absolutely perfect for me. They have bomb charcuterie boards, breakfast options, dinner sides. They have this amazing crispy garlic bread. They even have desserts, fresh fruits and vegetables. And for those nights when you have less time and you just need to get dinner on the table, HelloFresh has their quick and easy meals, including their 15-minute recipes. One of my favorites during this cold weather has been the creamy mushroom chowder with couscous. Oh, so delicious, so flavorful, hearty, filling. There's just a hint of citrus in there to brighten it up. It's perfect winter comfort food. Also, me and the kids just made these roll-ups, these like pepperoni and cheese roll-ups that were amazing. They were so simple to make, so easy to make, and we loved them. And they came with this great ranch to like dip in because they have options for the kids too. You know, this was a kid's option, but I ended up liking it, you know, just as much, if not more than they did. So if all of that sounds good to you, and why wouldn't it, all you have to do is go to HelloFresh.com and use code stephanieharlowe free. And if you do that, you're going to get free breakfast for life. HelloFresh is going to give you 1 breakfast per box while your subscription is active. This is a great deal. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day, and free breakfast is even better. So once again, that is code stephanieharlowe free, or click the link below in the description box to get free breakfast for life. Thank you so much to HelloFresh for sponsoring today's video, and let's dive in. Okay, it's very difficult to figure out where to start in a case like this one. So I'm going to quickly introduce you to the 3 men who were found dead outside this Kansas City home on January 9th. We have 38-year-old Ricky Johnson, 37-year-old David Harrington, and 36-year-old Clayton McGinney. On Sunday, January 7th, these 3 men arrived at the home of Jordan Willis in time for the 3:25 p.m. kickoff of the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Los Angeles Chargers NFL game. Now, once again, this was the accepted narrative that was being reported for like a full week and a half, 2 weeks, that they had gotten to Jordan Willis's house in time for the 3:25 p.m. kickoff. Recently, it has been said that they didn't come to his house until after the game, even though the whole basis of this case, all the headlines are like 3 Kansas City men die at the home of a friend while watching the Chiefs game, right? So who knows? Were they there for the game? Were they not there for the game? The attorney for Jordan Willis, who, remember, is the guy who's renting this house, the only guy who survived this night, apparently, this attorney said, listen, they were at a couple of different places watching the game that night, and then they showed up at Jordan's house for like an after party to like hang out and play video games or watch TV. Who knows? Who knows what the actual truth is? Who knows what the actual accurate timeline is? We don't. We're just getting constant like mixed messages. and changing reporting, and a lot of that is coming from John Pacino, who is Jordan Willis's lawyer. And honestly, if Jordan Willis is completely innocent, his lawyer is not making him seem that way. But anyways, let's continue. Reportedly, Jordan Willis had gone to high school with two of these men that he had over to his house that night. And he'd known the third man for years, and they were all friends who would hang out often, and they were all big fans of the Kansas City Chiefs. The football game ended almost exactly 3 hours after it started, so it ended around 6:30 p.m., and during their evening together, Jordan Willis made plans to get them all tickets for the next home game. However, Ricky Johnson, Clayton McGeeney, and David Harrington never made it home from Jordan's house that evening, and for the next 2 days, they weren't answering calls or texts from their family and friends. These same family and friends also claimed that they attempted to reach Jordan Willis on Monday, January 8th and Tuesday, January 9th, but he was not responding either. During that time, several people also went to Jordan's house. They knocked on his door. They banged on his door. But there was no sign of life from inside. No one answered the door. On the evening of January 9th, Clayton McGeeney's fiancée of 12 years, April Mahoney, she went to Jordan's house. She knocked on the front door looking for some answers. When no one came to the door, April, she broke into the house, okay? Which I got to give her credit for this because she's going to find her man and nothing's going to stop her. She managed to find a way to enter the home through the basement. She gets inside the home. She starts calling Jordan's name. Obviously, it's his house. If he's there, she wants to make her presence known. And she's calling Jordan's name and looking around. He's not answering. He's not emerging from anywhere. He's not walking up to her and being like, "What are you doing in my house, April? How'd you get in here?" He's nowhere to be seen. Eventually, April made her way to the back door of the home, where she found what has been described as a partially frozen body sitting on the back patio. And then April did the obvious thing. She called 911. Police arrived approximately 10 minutes later, around 9:51 p.m., and at that time, they discovered 2 more bodies in the backyard. Now, the homeowner, or the home renter, Jordan Willis, he has not spoken publicly, but he did hire attorney John Pacerno, who has been speaking on his behalf a lot. A lot. Too much, some might say. I would say too much, because the problem with this is that Pacerno has said some contradictory statements to different media outlets, and the details have been changing from one retelling to another. And what is the last thing we want to see when somebody is being suspected of being involved with a crime, when somebody's being suspected of having done something nefarious, something illegal? What you don't want is that person or the person representing them legally to be telling a bunch of different stories and not having things add up when there's already so much suspicion. So we are going to speak more specifically about how the story has changed and evolved. But the basic gist of what Jordan Willis claims is that he went to bed after the game and then he slept for the next 2 days. He didn't get any text messages from desperate people looking for their loved ones. And he didn't hear anyone knocking on his door because apparently, according to his lawyer, John Pacerno, Jordan sleeps with noise-canceling headphones on, and he also has a fan in his room, which prevents him from hearing things, I guess. Now, when I heard this part, the noise-canceling headphones and the fan, I was like, okay, I too sleep with a fan on. I like the feel of it. I don't like to get too hot when I'm sleeping. I also like the sound of it. Noise-canceling headphones, however, that got me because, first of all, they're not comfortable to sleep in. No headphones or earbuds or whatever are comfortable to sleep in. Not all night, not for 2 days straight. Zero. You'd have a headache within a few hours. But Jordan Willis lives alone. It's just him in this house. Why would you need noise-canceling headphones if you're by yourself in the house? Like, I have kids, so let's say I want to sleep during the day. I probably need noise-canceling headphones so I don't hear, like, the TV going and them running around and doing their basic daytime things. Why did Jordan Willis need to wear noise-canceling headphones when he was sleeping? Maybe it's just a habit. Maybe he can't have any sound, like cars driving by or car doors slamming or dogs barking in the neighborhood. Maybe he just wanted it to be completely quiet. And okay, I get that. But it did give me pause. It did make me take a beat and be like, it's kind of weird if you live alone, you're alone in the house, no one else is there. Why would you need noise-canceling headphones? But I digress. The Kansas City police have not really released any information about what happened when they entered the home of Jordan Willis. They have basically said, that they didn't need to get a search warrant because Jordan was cooperative. He let them in, he answered their questions, and he let them look through his house and through his yard, etc. And they say, everything is good. This is not being investigated as a homicide at this point, and Jordan Willis has been completely cooperative. But then recently, in the past few days, a neighbor who lived across the street from Jordan Willis actually released a video because he was going to bed for the evening on January 9th, on Tuesday, January 9th, when April Mahoney broke into Jordan Willis's house and called the police. He was going to bed and he's like closing up his house and he sees what appears to be a woman who looks like she's in a state of distress walking up from the back of Jordan Willis's house. And then he sees Jordan Willis apparently in his underwear. Okay, I can't tell from the video because it's blurry and dark, but apparently in his underwear being escorted out of the house in handcuffs. So did the police just handcuff Jordan Willis out of precaution? We know that they eventually unhandcuffed him and let him go because he was never placed under arrest. But for at least a moment or a few minutes, the police thought that there was something that happened here that, Jordan Willis needed to be cuffed for. So that is very interesting. The police, once again, very tight-lipped about this. They're not saying much. But friends of the 3 deceased men have taken to social media to fill in the blanks for us. And to be honest, it's quite bizarre. So a woman named Kaylee Latier wrote, quote, "This man was inside his home alive while my friends were dead in his yard for Lord knows how long. They were all hanging out since after the game Sunday. He knew people were looking for them. He read messages of people searching for him on Tuesday. My husband banged on his door for 20 minutes. My friend banged on his door and then busted a window and yelled and announced her presence while she's inside and still nothing from him. Then the cops come 10 minutes later and he comes out nonchalant in his boxers with an empty wine glass in his hand." End quote. Okay, so we're going to talk about the wine glass and the boxers and Jordan Willis's appearance when the police showed up around, 9 p.m. on that Tuesday night. But it has been reported that Jordan is the one who answered the door for the police when they were knocking and ringing the doorbell or whatever. And many people have said to themselves and in a public forum, hey, isn't it kind of weird that that same day, even just an hour or two before, April Mahoney was banging on his door and calling his name in his house and trying to get his attention, and Jordan didn't hear her. But the police come, and they're knocking on the door, and Jordan's strolling out in his boxers to answer the door for them. Like, how did he hear the police knocking on the door, but he didn't hear April or any of the other people who were knocking and calling and texting throughout that past 2 days, 48 hours. Another friend of these 3 deceased men, Lindsay Ray Baldwin, she also posted on social media saying, quote, "3 men do not just go outside and freeze to death while the owner of the home, their friend, stays inside and only when police show up comes outside in his boxers like you've just been chilling for 2 days while your 3 friends are dead outside. Make noise here, people. This story is not okay. He had been contacted for over 24 hours prior about where our friends were and also their cars still parked at his house and didn't reply to anyone." End quote. So for clarification, there were 2 vehicles allegedly belonging to the victims, which were still parked on the street outside of Jordan's house. And Jordan claimed that until the police showed up, he had no idea his friends were dead right outside his house. As I mentioned, one body was reportedly found on the back porch, while the other 2 were in the backyard. This backyard is surrounded by an 8-foot-tall privacy fence. So I suppose from the outside, you wouldn't be able to see into the yard. So nobody strolling by is going to see this, horrendous scene in Jordan's backyard. But you'd think that at some point during that 48 hours, Jordan himself from inside the house may have looked outside and saw something that didn't belong there, like bodies, dead bodies in his yard. But maybe not. Maybe he was just sleeping for 48 hours and he never looked outside and he couldn't hear anything because of the noise-canceling headphones. Now, in the aftermath of this shocking discovery, family members of the victims have spoken out, saying that something doesn't add up about the situation. David Harrington's mother, Jennifer Marquez, told Fox 4, quote, "I'm furious. Everybody is furious. Nobody believes this story. None of his friends, none of the families, none of us believe." End quote. It was also reported pretty early on that Jordan Willis had told some members of his family that his friends had frozen to death. Now, this would later be disputed, and his family members would say, no, Jordan never said that. But once again, like everything else in this case, it's a bunch of he said, she said, and anytime something incriminating happens or anytime something weird that doesn't kind of fit into the puzzle pops up, there's always somebody who's coming out and being like, no, I didn't mean that, or no, he never said that, or that didn't happen, things like that. So you just don't know what's true. Now, Ricky Johnson's brother, Jonathan Price, he's also said he's having a hard time buying the story that Jordan Willis had no idea what happened. Price said that the three men who died were very close. They were basically inseparable, often posting pictures together on social media, hanging out all the time. But Price doesn't really know who Jordan Willis is. And apparently, Jordan did go to high school with two of these guys. But in high school, they weren't really close friends. And it appears that after high school, they weren't super close friends either, even though it has been reported that they were all best buddies. But the family members and the friends of these three men who died, they're kind of coming out and saying, no, it really wasn't like that. Jordan wasn't a part of this tight-knit friend group at all. He was just kind of on the periphery, like he would pop in and out, but he wasn't a constant in this friend group. Once again, who knows what's actually true? Who knows what this relationship was actually like? It's a bunch of he said, she said. Jonathan Price said, quote, "I don't like to speculate very much, but my brother was a smart man and there's no way that he would just freeze to death. Freezing to death is not a cause of death that I would accept." End quote. And like I said recently, a video taken by a neighbor of Jordan shows the police escorting Jordan out of the house in handcuffs, but a spokesperson for the Kansas City Police has told media outlets that this case is 100% not being investigated as a homicide, and police had found no indications of foul play. I'm not sure how this early on, because this spokesperson was saying this within days of the bodies being found, I'm not sure how the police would feel that confident to say 100% we're not looking at this as a homicide, even though they don't have the autopsy reports, they don't have the toxicology report, right? So autopsies on these three men were performed on January 16th. And the medical examiner told USA Today that the results of the autopsies are still pending, and toxicology results are also not available yet. So I'm not sure how the police would confidently be able to say 100% they're not investigating it as a homicide. That seems a little irresponsible to say that because you don't know what happened to these guys. However, I also find it hard to believe that at this point, which we're in the last day of January while I'm filming this, I don't see how 2 weeks later we don't have the autopsy reports. I could see toxicology because you have to send that off. It has to be like looked at, by a lab, and the results have to be analyzed and all of that. But the medical examiner already performed the autopsies. So the medical examiner has some idea of what happens to these men. The police aren't releasing those details. Nobody's releasing those details. And it makes me feel almost like the police are being too laid back about it. You know how like in the beginning of a case where everybody's like, what's happening? This looks super suspicious. And the police are like, nothing to see here. And then it comes out, months later that the police were always suspecting that something had happened and they were always focused on one person and they just wanted to keep everything quiet so that they could do their investigation without spooking this person. It almost feels like that. But I could be wrong. I could be off base. Once again, it's so hard to battle between your gut and your brain in cases like this. So the police say that at this point, they're waiting on the medical examiner's reports to see if any further investigative steps need to be taken. So who is Jordan Willis, and what was he allegedly doing during the 2 days that his friends were missing and their families were desperately trying to find out what had happened to them? Jordan Willis is actually a senior principal scientist for the International AIDS Vaccine Initiative Neutralizing Antibody Center in Kansas City. That was a mouthful. Wow. So That's where he works. He's a scientist. He's a protein researcher. And in an interview, Jordan said that he works on data science, deep learning, and synthetic biology. And he does his work at the Scripps Research Center to apply data science software development and immunogen engineering to the germline targeting problem within HIV vaccine development. I know that this is a side quest we're about to go on, but it needs to happen because when I was reading this and writing the script, I saw a lot of words I didn't understand. A lot of words like germline targeting. What is that? And I needed to understand what these words meant because HIV has always been a very interesting topic for me. I took a class called The Biology of HIV and AIDS when I was in college getting my degree. It was something I chose to take, but it fulfilled a certain obligation that I needed for my degree, but I loved that class. I learned so much. It was so stimulating and satisfying for my ADHD brain because I was constantly getting like all of this new and interesting information. So I'm very interested in the whole issue with HIV and how hard it is to develop a vaccine for HIV because the HIV virus is constantly changing. And it's impossible, or it has been impossible, to create a vaccine for a virus that just doesn't stay the same. And you can't really create a vaccine for that. It's been difficult. It's been a challenge. So I had to understand what all of this meant. And now I have to share it with you because that's what we do. That's what we do. So germline targeting is a term that scientists use to describe the process of basically stimulating or guiding the immune system to induce antibodies that can counteract HIV. So with vaccines, we usually only have to worry about treating or, preventing a handful of strains. But HIV is different because of how quickly it mutates, which is why, like I said, a vaccination has been so hard to create. It's like trying to knit a shirt for a baby. And when you see this baby, the baby's a certain size. And so you start knitting the sweater for this baby. And by the time you have the sweater ready, the baby has aged 15 years and grown a tail and maybe another arm out of its back. So the sweater obviously doesn't fit anymore, and you got to go back to the drawing board and make a new sweater that's bigger and has an armhole coming out the back and maybe a little like canopy for the tail. But then the same thing keeps happening when you go back to that baby. Now the baby has two heads, and now you have to make a sweater that has two neck holes. And then you can't basically ever get this baby into the sweater, right? So to try and solve this problem, researchers and scientists have isolated what they call broadly neutralizing antibodies, and they're finding these antibodies in people who have lived with HIV for at least 3 years. Now, these specific antibodies seem to be able to keep most, if not all, variants of HIV at bay, and so these antibodies are being studied to see how they interact with specific parts of the HIV virus, so that they can be used to basically reverse engineer a vaccine that will then create these special antibodies in the human immune system. So germline targeting begins with a primer vaccine, and this primer vaccine is going to activate B cells. B cells have the potential to generate these broadly neutralizing antibodies that we see in people who are living with the HIV infection for 3 years or more. Now, B cells circulate through the blood. They're in there on patrol, keeping an eye out for invading pathogens, and when a specific B cell comes in contact with a foreign pathogen, they go through a process called somatic hypermutation, which basically means they are learning. They're changing and adapting based on the specific pathogen that they came in contact with, so the next time they see the same pathogen, they're ready to neutralize the threat, and they don't have to learn about it. So it's a much quicker immune response. The goal then is to use a series of different vaccine immunogens to nudge these B cells along until they're capable of achieving a broad and potent immune response that can hopefully protect against an HIV infection. Now, this research has actually shown a lot of promise. There's been a ton of articles about it, a ton of, scholarly articles and news articles, and I've read a lot of them. They're calling it groundbreaking, and not just for the HIV infection, but for other deadly infectious diseases. It's all very interesting. All very interesting. But at the end of the day, what it tells me is that Jordan Willis is not a dumb person, not even close. He graduated with a PhD in chemical and physical biology from Vanderbilt University in 2014, and before that he studied chemistry and molecular biology at Northeast Missouri State University. I also read in an interview that he did that Jordan is a dog fanatic, and he has 2 pit bull mixes that he calls Sadie and Daisy. And he loves to take Sadie and Daisy for walks in the park. He named some of his software after them. He loves these dogs, right? Remember that, because Sadie and Daisy are going to come back into the story in just a minute. So as I said, multiple media outlets have reached out to Jordan Willis for a comment, but thus far he's only communicated through his attorney, John Paserno, who has said, quote, Jordan had absolutely nothing to do with their deaths, nor does he know how or when they exited his house. He had no knowledge that they remained in his backyard or that they needed medical attention. Had he known, he certainly would have called for help. The last time he saw them was when they left his house and he went to bed. End quote. John Paserno also insisted that Jordan had received no phone calls or text messages from those people who were looking for the three missing men. But he did admit that the wife of one of the men had tried to reach out via Facebook Messenger. However, Jordan, unfortunately, did not see this message until after the police arrived to his house on the evening of January 9th. So Paserno cleared up early rumors that the victims' cars had been parked in Jordan's driveway, and he said that Jordan did notice that there was two cars that belonged to his friends that were still parked on his street, but it wasn't unusual for his friends to leave their cars there overnight. Remember that John Paserno, this lawyer, Jordan's lawyer, said that Jordan knew the cars were still parked on the street. He knew this, okay? So John Paserno said, quote, Jordan is unaware of how his friends died. Like the rest of us, Jordan is anxiously awaiting the results of the autopsy and toxicology report, end quote. So John Paserno, he's talked to a lot of different media outlets, and the shifting details during these interviews, they have raised a few eyebrows.
All right, so a lot of people, particularly family members of those who died, have a lot of questions for your client. What does he say happened here?
Well, at this time, he doesn't say anything different than what he's told police previously, that he has no knowledge of what happened to those young men after they left his home.
Let me read you. This is from one of his friends, from one of the friends of the one of the people who died, who said on Facebook, the man was inside his home alive while my friends were dead in his yard for Lord knows how long. They were all hanging out since after the game Sunday. He knew people were looking for them. He read messages of people searching for him on Tuesday. My husband banged on his door for 20 minutes. My friend banged on the door and then busted a window and yelled and announced her presence while she's inside, and still nothing from him. Then the cops come 10 minutes later and he comes out nonchalant in his boxers with an empty wine glass in his hand. Nothing is adding up. Dave, Clay, and Ricky need and deserve justice. They didn't deserve this. Your response?
Sure. Even if all of those things are true, that doesn't mean he had anything to do with what happened to those young men. Obviously, three men who die all at the same time. And there's no signs of foul play whatsoever from the police. There's nothing to indicate that Jordan had any involvement whatsoever in their deaths. I spoke with the prosecutor this morning, as a matter of fact. The toxicology reports are due in a couple of weeks, and we can all speculate as to how they died. But as far as my client being involved, Jordan didn't have anything to do with their deaths. When they left his home after the game, he didn't even really know which door they went out. They were in the backyard. He doesn't use that particular door. He goes out in the front. And so he had no knowledge that they were out there until, Tuesday, when he was told that they were out there.
And what of the claims from the families that they were trying to contact him and he wouldn't respond and they were going to the house, et cetera?
Sure. I don't know about whether or not they went to the house or tried to contact him, but he was home sporadically. I know another allegation I've seen floating out there is that he would have had to put the dogs out, that the dogs would have went in the backyard, and that's untrue as well. The dogs stay at his dad's house, which his dad lives in a different location, and that's where the dogs were. He had no reason to go in the backyard. As you can see there, we've had recent snowstorms and that kind of thing. So he had absolutely no knowledge that they were out there. They were his friends. They were at his house socializing. If he had found them out there or if they were in danger, he would have called the police and tried to help them. He's a highly educated guy. He's a good guy. He has a full-time job. In no way would he try to harm his buddies.
And to be really clear, he didn't know that there were three dead, frozen friends outside his house.
Correct. No idea. I mean, if you didn't look in your backyard, how would you know that?
All right. John Paserno, thank you so much for coming on the program. Appreciate it.
Okay, so let's go over the important points before we move on to the next clip of a John Paserno interview. Paserno says that Jordan claims his 3 friends left his home and he didn't even know what door they used to exit the house. Remember that. Paserno also claims that Jordan's 2 dogs, Daisy and Sadie, they were not at his house that weekend. They were with Jordan's father, which is convenient, right? Because if the dogs had been there, then a likely assumption to make is that Jordan would have had to have let them out, so they could use the bathroom. And it makes sense that he would most likely let them out into the fenced-in backyard, not the front yard, which faced the street and traffic. If these dogs had been home with Jordan, it would have been impossible for him to avoid the backyard, and it probably only would have been a minute before Daisy and or Sadie identified the bodies of 3 men in the backyard. So the fact that his dogs weren't there, because people did start talking, and they were like, dude's got 2 dogs. Tell me how he didn't notice that there were dead bodies in his backyard. He's got 2 dogs that have to go out at some point during this 48 hours when he's sleeping. But then Jordan came out through his lawyer, and he was like, no, the dogs weren't there that weekend. They were with my dad. Now, what I would wonder is, was this a common thing for Jordan to bring his dogs to his dad's house when he's home the whole time? Like, did Jordan's dad often dog sit Daisy and Sadie for days at a time when Jordan's home? Because, like, I'll bring my dogs over to my mom's if I'm going to be out of town. But if I'm home, it would be weird, to not have them at home with me. What's going on with that? What was the reason that the dogs were at Jordan's dad's house and not at Jordan's house that weekend? It feels a little convenient, and I'm not saying it's not true, because how would I know? We don't know. But it just feels convenient that they weren't there, because if the dogs had been there, I do believe it would have been absolutely impossible for Jordan to not have noticed that there was 3 dead bodies in his backyard. But I also want to take a quick look at these photos of the house that Jordan was renting, because John Paserno says that his client had no reason to go into the backyard. He doesn't use that door, John Paserno said. He goes out the front door. I'm sure Jordan probably uses that back door when his dogs are home, right? But John Paserno says Jordan has no reason to go into that backyard, no reason to even look out there, which is supposed to answer the bizarre question of how he went 2 days without knowing his 3 friends were dead outside. But real estate photos show the interior of a beautiful home with tons of natural light due to all of the windows facing out into the backyard. It looks like in the main portion of the house, there's 5 sets of very wide ground floor windows overlooking the backyard. There's 2 more large windows in the master bedroom, and those also overlook the backyard. Around the corner from the kitchen, there's a room with double windows on 3 sides that looks out into the backyard, and also a full set of sliding glass doors that open up into the patio where one of the bodies was reportedly found, sitting, I guess, in a chair on the patio. And between, it looks like the living room and the kitchen, there's kind of like a hallway or like a breezeway. And there's windows in there as well that look out to the backyard.
I was able to get this from the public access road, public land, able to see into that backyard and shoot this video. And when you take a look at it closely, there's one thing in particular I want to point out, and that's actually the lawn chairs, right? We know from David Harrington's family that Harrington was found right there in that lawn chair, the other 2 men's bodies actually laying down on the ground. But look, you can see when I zoom in on this video, the 2 lawn chairs sitting right there on the patio, right? So that gives us some perspective of how David Harrington's body was found, where it was specifically on that patio.
Wait, hold on.
Now, to your point that you've been making all those windows.
Wait, before you move on, don't, because this is insane. I'm going to ask our director to blow that picture up full screen and take us off the screen, because I was thinking about this. That's the kitchen window up high. Those chairs, one of them is kind of below the kitchen window and out of the view of that door, right? That white door. So if he was dead in that chair,
right,
you could definitely say you didn't see him out the kitchen window, you didn't see him out that white door, you didn't see him out the 2 windows to the left. You should have seen him out of the sliders, right? Except there's a curtain rod over the sliders, and it is entirely possible that the curtains were pulled on those sliders, and you would not see him from the windows on the right, to the right of the sliders. So it is possible if only one window, the big sliding glass doors, had curtains pulled, you might not miss. Were you able to see in that sliders if there were curtains there, or if there were big blinds that might have been pulled. Could you get a view of that?
I couldn't say for certain to you, Ashley. What I can tell you is that almost all of these windows have some level of blinds on them. As for specifically that slider glass door, to my eyes right now, it does not appear as if there is anything blocking the way. Of course, time has passed. The police have been inside there, not to mention we believe the homeowner's been inside since Jordan moved out. So things might have been rearranged or changed or, you know, blinds drawn or blinds open. Based on what I can tell, there was nothing right there directly blocking it. But I see your point, and I see how it might be possible to miss out on somebody that might be sitting there. But to me, this is a large backyard. It's a large patio. It's hard to see in this 2D format, to your point. But really, just the thought of 3 people out there, 2 laying on the ground, 1 sitting upright in a chair, it's just really hard for me to believe that it's not. If anybody glanced out there from any of the 6 other windows, right, from upstairs, from downstairs, the kitchen, or the sliding glass in the breakfast nook, as you call it, right? There's so many opportunities for anyone.
True.
If it snowed over the weekend, aren't you gonna look outside and see how much snow came down?
Maybe. Quickly, you were able to get an interview about the view out of Jordan Willis's kitchen, and there's a big sliding glass door. What'd you learn?
Yeah, exactly. I think a lot of people here are a little skeptical about the story that we're hearing, in specific, Jordan Willis's story, the fact that he slept through 48 hours without actually having any sort of inclination that his friends were dead outside. And so most people that I'm here in the neighborhood that I'm speaking to tell me that they just don't know Jordan. He seems to be a bit of a hermit. He doesn't come out. He doesn't really talk to neighbors. He has 2 dogs, we know, but he doesn't really do much dog walking. And so a lot of people are a little weirded out by this whole story. Here's what one neighbor told me.
Willis did say that he didn't see his friends out, but he has a sliding glass door going right into his backyard, and it's in his kitchen, so, like, you have to see it. I don't know. I just feel like there's no way you didn't see your friends dead outside.
So even if he didn't contribute to their deaths, it's a little weird. He may not be telling the whole truth.
Right. I mean, people were calling him, people were knocking on the door, and he wasn't answering to anybody, so I just feel like that's odd that you wouldn't say anything.
So if Jordan was home for 2 days, are we to believe he never glanced out any of these windows? And as you heard in that clip, you've got, you know, these 2 News Nation reporters kind of going back and forth and, you know, going over the possibilities. Like, yeah, I guess it's possible he didn't look outside. And I guess, you know, maybe he could have, but like, how could he not have? And that's a great representation of where this case is at, which is just like super confusing. The puzzle pieces are not fitting together. The math is not mathing, and no one really knows what to make of it. But I do think that most people feel a weird, like, gut instinct that it's not completely innocent and something happened here that goes beyond 3 men walking outside, sitting down, and then freezing to death without doing anything about it. So John Paserno, Jordan Willis's attorney, he mentioned something about snowfall as well in his interview. But according to records from Weather Underground, no significant snowfall happened until Tuesday, January 9th. So that means when those 3 men were outside Jordan Willis's house all day and all night, January 8th, there wasn't snowfall covering their bodies. There was just 3 bodies chilling in the yard and on the patio in broad daylight without any camouflage, without any way of concealing them, which is bananas to me. Now, we also heard John Paserno say during this initial interview that Jordan was home sporadically over the course of those 2 days, a statement he would need to clarify or fix or backtrack on later. And lastly, Paserno said something interesting. He said all 3 men died at the same time. If we're to believe this was an accident and these 3 people maybe, you know, got locked out of Jordan's house and they were unable to get back in, or this was some kind of medical emergency that one of the men experienced, did they not all have cell phones? Did they not call Jordan to see if he could unlock the door and let them in? Did they call anyone and ask for help? If they were cold and unable to enter the home, why didn't they get into their cars and turn the heat on at least? If they were getting that cold, I mean, I would have, you know, smashed a window. I would have smashed a window like April Mahoney did. April Mahoney was able to get into the house, but none of these 3 grown men, while they were freezing to death, were able to get themselves out of that horrible situation in the middle of a suburban neighborhood where there's houses all over the place. You can break into Jordan's house, break a window, say, sorry, dude, I'll pay you for it later. We were freezing to death out there. Go in your car, turn it on, get some heat on, call someone like your dad or your girlfriend or your fiance and say, hey, can you come, get me because we're locked out of this house? Or, I mean, just get in your car and drive home, right? Unless their car keys and things were still in Jordan Willis's house, which is possible because it's been, recently released that there were some belongings of these 3 men in Jordan's house that the police have now given to the families of these men. So that is possible. But why would you go outside and sit there and not do anything? And Jordan said, I don't know if we've heard this yet from John Paserno, Jordan's lawyer, but Jordan said that when his 3 friends left and he went to bed, he had left the front door unlocked so that they could come back in and hang out by themselves if they wanted to. So if the front door was unlocked, why couldn't they just get out of the backyard, walk to the front door, and go in? There's a lot of questions here. There's a lot of things that don't make sense. Next, John Paserno was interviewed by Ashley Banfield of News Nation. And in my opinion, at least during this interview, Ashley Banfield is clearly not really buying Paserno's story. During this interview, the mystery deepened when Paserno revealed that there had been a 5th man present at Jordan's house on January 7th.
I'm so curious about what could have possibly happened, as are so many people watching right now, as I'm sure you are, and potentially even. Do you know from speaking to your client, were there drugs involved with the party, the football watching party that night?
There are some things that I'm not going to be allowed to comment on based on confidentiality reasons. There were, in addition to the 3 gentlemen that are deceased, in addition to Jordan, there was one other individual that was present in the home. And I'm not going to comment on anything about the activities that were going on there other than the fact that they were there and they were socializing after the Chiefs game.
It's interesting, though, that you would bring up that there was another person there other than the 3 who died, the owner of the home, and then this mystery man after the question I asked about drugs. Is there a reason for that?
No, just in fact, I learned a little bit more about this other individual today. And I also, it's my understanding that he spoke with police as well and that he supported what Jordan told law enforcement and what we believe actually was going on at the time.
Has that 4th man and Jordan, have they spoken together since this tragedy unfolded?
I don't believe that they have.
And yet it's your understanding that this 4th mystery person, whose name I hope will surface soon, his account of what happened that night is directly in correlation with Jordan's account.
Sure, and he's not a mystery person. He's one of the group of friends that they watch the game with. He's known to everybody. He's known to law enforcement. So he's not a mystery person. He's somebody there. And essentially, from my understanding, everything that he told the police is in line with what Jordan told the police, even though they were interviewed separately.
I'm so glad he's not a mystery person. What's his name?
I'm not going to provide his name. If and when he chooses to go public and say his name, then he can do that. He's not my client. I don't represent him. I don't feel comfortable doing that.
Okay, I understand. Did your client ever leave the home from Sunday night and the football game until Tuesday when they discovered the bodies in his backyard? Did he ever leave and go outside the home?
No, I don't believe that he did. He's self-employed. He works out of his home. He stayed in the home the entire time from, the basic scenario is they had watched the Chiefs game in a couple of different places. They went back to his place, his home afterwards to play some video games and hang out. And at some point during that process, he got tired and he fell asleep. Before he fell asleep, they were going to leave. He actually escorted them to the door, said their goodbyes, opened the door. He went back on the couch and he crashed. And then when he woke up, they were gone. And during the day and a half that occurred, 2 days, I guess, because the police came in around 10 o'clock on Tuesday to his house, he was doing the things that he normally does inside of his home. And that he was sleeping, he was eating, and he was working.
Can I back up? Yeah, can I back up for a moment there? Are you saying that your client, Jordan Willis, escorted the 3 victims to the door? He showed them to the door. Did they walk out the door?
It's not that formal, Ashley. He didn't escort them. They're his friends. Okay. They've been together all day. They're leaving the house. You know, they're guys. They shake hands. They hug. See you later, bro. Whatever they did. But he left them as they were leaving the home. It's not unusual for him and his friends to spend time in each other's homes. It's not unusual for them to hang out when the other person isn't there even. And in this case, he was there. So for whatever reason, they either came back in the home or they went directly to the backyard. That part, no one knows the answer to. Jordan believes they came back in the house and hung out for a while and continued to play video games. And at some point, they went outside in the backyard.
But to be clear, those three men left the house. Jordan saw them leave the house.
He said goodbye to them. He laid down and he crashed, and they went out the front door. Yes.
They went out the front door. He witnessed them leaving the front door of his house.
Sure. Yeah. After he said goodbye to them, he was hanging out. He went back on the couch and he slept. So at some point, they decided either to come back inside the house and hang out for a while, or they went out on the backyard and hung out, which due to the cold temperatures, I don't believe that's the case. I think they probably came back inside and continued to play video games and hang out for a while before they left.
Can you just tell me if there's anything in the backyard of interest? Is there a fire pit? Is there something? Is there a barbecue? Is there something of interest in the backyard that would have drawn them to go there?
You know, I don't know what's in the backyard. I've never been to the house. What I know is what you know from these pictures here. It was a really cold night, so I doubt that anybody would be out there socializing. You know, typically when guys are hanging out or people are hanging out at the house, people will go outside randomly to smoke or do whatever, get some fresh air, and then come back in. Other than that, I can't speculate about what else was going on out there.
Okay, I love this interview with Ashley Banfield because she seems like the lawyer in this conversation. And John Paserno seems like somebody who's doing the most to avoid directly answering her questions. In this interview, we now have Paserno saying that Jordan never left the house during those 2 days. And he clarified this to another media outlet, claiming that what he had meant to say was that Jordan had been sleeping and he left his bedroom sporadically, not that he had left the house sporadically. Paserno told Ashley Banfield that Jordan had walked his friends out, that he had walked them to the front door and said goodbye, and they left through the front door. But just a few days earlier, remember, he told Dan Abrams that Jordan didn't even know what door his friends had left through, and Jordan hadn't seen the friends leave. And Ashley Banfield is picking up on this, and she's like trying to clarify. She's trying to get him to answer directly. And she's like, wait, are you saying he walked his friends to the front door to say goodbye? And John Paserno's like, well, it's not that formal. It's not that formal. And she's like, so he walked them to the front door and saw them leave through the front door? And John Paserno answers, sure. Weird answer. It's either a yes or a no. Jordan should remember how his friends left the house, and if he saw them leave, and if he said goodbye to them, he should remember what door they left through. A few days before, when Paserno was talking to Dan Abrams, Jordan didn't remember or know what door they left through. Now he's talking to Ashley Banfield, and the story's changed, and Paserno says that Jordan walked his friends to the front door, slapped each other up, hugged, goodbye, and he watched them leave out the front door, but then he left the front door open in case they wanted to come back in, right? And even previous to this interview, John Paserno had told another news outlet that Jordan had gone to bed before his friends left. So I don't know how he would walk them to the door and say goodbye and slap them up and hug when he'd gone to bed before they even left.
John Paserno today contradicting a statement he released over the weekend where he said his client Jordan Willis saw the men leave. He's flipped. Now he claims Willis went to sleep while the three victims and a fifth man continued to hang out in his house.
When he would have people over his house sometimes, as people do, they get tired. They're people who are very close to you, and then you feel comfortable going to bed and allowing them to leave whenever they want to leave.
So the first version of the story that John Paserno released in a written statement was that Jordan had seen his friends leave. The second version that he gave to this news outlet was that Jordan had gone to sleep while his friends were still there, along with a fifth individual. Then Paserno told Ashley Banfield that Jordan had said goodbye to his friends, slapped them up, hugged them, watched them walk out the front door, and then he went to sleep. But the three friends could have re-entered the house at any time because Jordan had left the door unlocked in case they felt the need to come back inside. Maybe they would come back in to play video games. Maybe they decided to hang out in the backyard. How would Jordan know? He was asleep after all. And there was other versions of this story that Paserno was floating around out there. Like, one of the stories was that they were all watching TV and Jordan fell asleep on the couch, and then he woke up to let them out, and then he went upstairs. Another one was that Jordan had fallen asleep on the couch while they were watching TV, and he woke up and they were gone, and then he went upstairs to bed. It's weird. Like, this isn't a difficult thing to nail down. We're not even asking for specifics. We're not asking for certain times. Like, when did you wake up? When did you fall asleep? When did they leave? Like, we're not asking for that. We just want to know, what was the series of events when these three people left your house? Were you awake? Were you asleep? Did you walk them to the front door? Did you just say bye from the couch and you don't know what door they left from? What's going on here? And probably the most interesting thing that I heard in that interview was that this fifth man, the unidentified one, he had talked to the police, and Paserno told Ashley Banfield that he was confident this fifth man, this mystery man who has been identified now as Alex Lee Weimer, it was Paserno's understanding that Alex's story that he told to the police lined up with what Jordan was saying. Now, that ended up not being exactly true, because Alex Lee Weimer also got an attorney who came out and said, "Oh no, not today, Satan. My client was not the last person to see these three men alive."
Cover up. Something's wrong with the picture.
Jim McGinney, the uncle of Clayton McGinney, is upset, frustrated, and to this point displeased as the story of what happened on that Sunday night in the Northland gets less clear and more foggy by the day. John Paserno, the attorney for the man who lived at the home, has had an evolving story since Friday. First, he said the fifth person was still there when the three men died. He would change his tune in a News Nation interview hours later.
Before he fell asleep, they were going to leave. He actually escorted them to the door, said their goodbyes, opened the door. He went back on the couch and he crashed.
That statement running contrary to what Paserno told us just hours before. In an exclusive conversation with Fox 4, the fifth man's attorney, Andrew Tauch, tells us his client arrived at the home around 7 p.m. He left just after midnight, and when he left, all three men and Jordan Willis were alive and watching Jeopardy! Tauch says his client then received a text from Clayton McGinney's fiance and Ricky Johnson's mother on Tuesday inquiring about their whereabouts. At that point, he texted Willis and Johnson. He never got a response. That's another inconsistency. Willis's attorney said his client never received any text, just messages through Facebook. We contacted Paserno about this, and he declined to comment.
So we also heard in that clip that the whole, text messaging, trying to contact Jordan thing was a little bit unclear, right? Because in his initial statement, Paserno had said that Jordan had not received any messages from people who were looking for these three missing men. But Paserno would comment about the text messages in a later News Nation interview with Chris Cuomo.
Yes, I would like to address those the phone calls and the text messages if I could, since the reporter left that hanging out there.
Go ahead, because the initial suggestion was he only got a Facebook message and nobody was really trying to get him. Malik says that's not true, because the fifth friend says that he was getting messages and he was trying to find him and he wasn't getting his messages answered either. So what is it?
So I have sent your staff the records, his phone records, which I acquired this afternoon, and also the text message records. And during that period of time, the phone calls that came in on the early morning hour after the game on the 7th, and the early morning hours of the 8th, all the way to the 8th, and then all the way to the 9th when the police came, the only calls that came in were one from his dad, which we recognize the number, and you have the actual numbers. Mm-hmm. And then the other calls, there were 8 of them that came in from what is a dummy number. He has a robo-killer app on his phone. And so when calls come in that are unrecognized or for whatever reason, they read as this dummy number. I've dialed this dummy number myself. It's a non-existent number. You get a message saying whatever. It's a dummy number. And then the only other call that came in was all zeros, a call that he blocked again from a robocop.
What about
text? The text messages?
Yeah.
Robotext. Yeah. As far as the text messages go, which you have, there are a series of incoming text messages. That's all we have. There are no outgoing text messages. So the corollary to that, what goes along with what makes sense to that is when you and I get a text message, typically we're going to respond. If somebody texts you and says, hey, these 3 guys are missing, and they're your friend, you're going to respond. If Alex had said, if someone had said to him, the text message came in, why don't you respond? You would respond to your friend, right? That's what you would do.
Maybe.
The reporter wanted to twist my words when I said he didn't receive any messages. And technically I'm right. His phone received the messages. If you don't look at it, you did not receive the messages. I guess I should have said he didn't read the messages. And yes, as far as the text message from his friend, he did not tell me about that. And when I was informed of that, I asked him about that. And then he told me that's right. So there's 2 text messages, or excuse me, a Facebook message and a text message. And neither one he got before the police arrived at his home.
All right.
But the phone records that you have are consistent with him. If you look at them, the calls were early in the morning.
Yeah,
and
we have
his
them.
dad called at noon and he picked up. He didn't pick up any in the morning. He didn't pick up any in the evening when he would have been sleeping. There were no other phone calls. And the text messages, the same way, there's no outgoing text messages those 2 days.
Right.
Which, as you know, who can stay off their phone for 2 days straight unless you're principally sleeping it out of it and you don't have your phone around you? So everything is consistent with what he's saying.
I like the way Paserno is so put out that his words were misinterpreted or twisted, as he says, when in fact, that is what he initially claimed. That's what he said, that Jordan had received no text messages, which definitely has the implication that none had been sent. He didn't say that Jordan didn't open the text messages. He didn't say that the text messages were there. Jordan just didn't see them. He said Jordan received no messages from people looking for these guys. And John makes it seem like Jordan was just sleeping this entire 2 days, and he was only able to receive 1 call at noon from his father. Maybe his father was calling about Sadie and Daisy and being like, hey, why are your dogs here? Or, am I supposed to be saying your dogs are here? Allegedly, don't come for me. It's just, a little humor to lighten the mood. But it's kind of weird that the one person he talked to, the one person he was able to receive a call from that day was his father. But he wasn't able to answer any other calls or messages. So he just happened to wake up, right? He just happened to wake up for a few minutes, blurry-eyed, noise-canceling headphones, and he looked at his phone. He's like, oh, my father is calling me. Let me answer. I don't know. John Paserno even says to Chris Cuomo, if we get text messages and we see them and we know they are there, typically we're going to respond. False. John Paserno, false. I have tons of unread text messages from people who are asking me things I don't want to deal with or address at that moment because I'm having executive dysfunction or I can't even. So let's just say I had some knowledge that something had gone down in my house and I didn't want to have to answer for it in that exact moment. I'd probably not even open messages from people who are asking me about the thing that I didn't want to talk about. And when I say probably, I mean definitely. I definitely wouldn't. So it's not really fair to make a broad generalization like, well, typically when we get text messages, we answer them, don't we? No. I mean, I don't. I can only speak from my personal experience, but I try to avoid text messages like the plague, okay? People are different. It looks like Jordan maybe was a person who also wasn't super concerned with getting text messages because he was getting all of these messages, allegedly, and he was just not seeing them or reading them, I guess. But that's neither here nor there. The whole text message thing is very weird. The whole people banging on his door and he doesn't know that they're banging on his door for 2 days straight. Very weird. It's all very confusing, so I'm going to try to break it down really quick because Inside Edition has recently put together a rough timeline of what it's believed happened that night based on interviews, based on what the lawyers are saying. So Alex Weimerly arrived to the home of Jordan Willis around 7 p.m., and at that time, he said Jordan and the 3 other friends were already there. At 7:30 p.m., Clayton McGeeney texted his cousin Alan. I guess Clayton worked with his cousin, and Clayton was like, oh, don't worry about this construction job that we have tomorrow, which would have been Monday. Me and Ricky Johnson will handle it so that you can rest up after a back injury. I guess Alan had a back injury and it was hurting him, so he didn't want to do the work the next day. So we know that at least they were alive at 7:30. And we also know that they were alive at midnight because just after midnight, Alex Weimer Lee left the house, and he claims that when he left, all 4 remaining men were still alive and awake watching Jeopardy! And that includes Jordan Willis and the 3 friends who would turn up dead sometime in the next few hours. John Paserno claimed that Jordan went to sleep around 12:30 in the morning, and whether Jordan left his friends hanging out or walked them to the front door is still unclear. I guess the final answer would be that he walked them to the front door or at least saw them leave through the front door, but like I said, it's been going back and forth. There's so many different versions emerging. You don't really know. At 9 a.m. on Tuesday, January 9th, McGeeney's fiance, April, texted Alex Weimer Lee and asked if he knew where the 3 missing men were because she had known that he'd been at Jordan's the night before. Ricky Johnson's mother also texted Alex with the same question around that same time. Alex then claims he texted Jordan Willis but received no reply. At 7 p.m. that same night, a close friend of the missing men, Dakota Latier, he went to Jordan's house, knocked on the door for 20 minutes. 2 hours later, April arrived and broke into the house through the basement, discovering the body on the porch and calling the police. Apparently, Jordan did not hear April knocking. He didn't hear her breaking in or calling his name, but when the police arrived, he heard them at the door and he emerged wearing only his underwear and holding an empty wine glass, which that's a bizarre image to have, in general. That is a bizarre image to have. And once again, it's weird. It's suspicious. According to John Paserno, Jordan's attorney, he has an answer for the bizarre empty wine glass thing, too. He said the wine glass was not empty, it contained water, and it had been refilled after it was used to drink wine out of the night before, which, by the way, the night before would have been the evening of January 8th, a full day and night since Jordan's friends had been over to watch the game and hang out. And John Paserno is telling us that Jordan pretty much slept for 2 days straight. He crashed out for 48 hours, and I'm not saying that it's not true. And listen, there were times in my younger days when I would draw the blinds, turning my bedroom into an eternal night, and I would sleep like a straight-up vampire, a famished vampire who hasn't had blood in a millennia, all right? But I also wasn't randomly getting up, gulping a bottle of wine by myself, and then going back to sleep with the wine glass while never once looking at my phone or checking messages. Like, if you're drinking wine by yourself in your house, what are you doing if not scrolling through your phone? What are you doing? So that's a weird thing. The whole wine glass thing, the whole drinking wine the night before thing. Maybe he meant that Jordan had been drinking wine on the 7th, the night his friends were over. I don't know, but that's not what he said. And as a lawyer, he should be more careful about what he's saying. Okay, John Paserno? Let this be a lesson to you, because you dropped the ball a lot of times. In recent days, more family members have spoken out, adding their voices to the growing wave of disbelief. David Harrington's father, John, said that both he and David's mother are convinced that Jordan Willis played a part in the deaths of these 3 men, saying, quote, "We just haven't figured out how yet. What else could it be? Perfectly healthy men don't just drop off the face of the earth. There were 4 of you in the house, and now 3 of them are dead, and you're not. That doesn't add up. I'm thinking that the 3 of them learned something or saw something that they shouldn't have seen, and he decided, well, I need to get rid of you now, friends or not." End quote. Harrington's mother, Jennifer Marquez, pointed out that Jordan Willis did not leave the house for 2 days, which would have given him plenty of time to get rid of evidence and clean up the scene. She said, quote, "Yes, I believe that something happened that night and that Jordan had something to do with it. We all believe that Jordan had something to do with it." End quote.
People do things with good intentions, but then something bad can happen that you didn't plan on. And obviously that's what's happened. Something came up that wasn't intended to happen. And with that, I want Jordan to come forward and say, this wasn't meant to happen, but this is what happened. I did this, or I saw this. Just tell us. I know he's scared, but he was there. He participated in whatever happened that night. He had to know. And he's the only one left that knows what happened. And I think that's why he didn't answer the text messages that people sent him. And I think that's why he waited so long to let anybody know what happened with the men. I heard from several people that said they kept texting him. They went and knocked on the door. You know, they banged on the door. She had to break in, but somebody went earlier in the day. How could you keep missing texts and people knocking on your door and not notice anything, not receive, any of that? I think he saw it and got scared and didn't know how to respond.
Marquez alleges that the police have not made Jordan take a drug or alcohol test as well. There is actually a lot of speculation that drugs had something to do with this, something to do with whatever happened. And we did hear Jordan's lawyer, John Paserno, neatly sidestep the drug question while he was talking to Ashley Banfield. So John Harrington, he's convinced that the police are going to claim that this was a case of a drug overdose, but he doesn't believe it's as simple as that. And many loved ones of these 3 victims insist that something else is afoot that has nothing to do with recreational drug use.
What do you think happened that night, and what do you make of the speculation surrounding drugs? Any thoughts about that?
I know none of these men are drug addicts. I know that. There's speculation that, they must have been doing this and that. And something may have happened that night. I don't know. I want people to know that this wasn't their life. If something was provided that night, I know that none of them had the means to provide that. And that's part of the reason why I think there's a problem, is that all of them were taking care of their families and their bills and did not have money for that kind of thing.
And many of these family members are not necessarily saying that drugs weren't involved. They just don't believe it was an average get-together where a normal amount of substances was ingested. And some people, like Ricky Johnson's father, they speculate that if there were drugs or substances involved, it may have been far more nefarious than casual. Ricky Johnson Sr. has revealed to media outlets that his son's coat was still inside Jordan's house, and he knows that Ricky would never go outside in the cold without his coat on. Johnson Sr. told Fox News, quote, "He may have done some drugs and stuff in the past, but I do not believe all 3 of them did drugs and fell over dead in that backyard. I'm not going to say that during a game he didn't have some drinks, but he wasn't irresponsible that he was going to go outside and freeze to death. I believe he, as in Jordan, drugged them, dragged them outside, and waited 2 days to call the police. You're talking about 3 grown men. If he was out there freezing, like they said, he could have kicked out a window to get into the house," end quote. Ricky Johnson's mother, Norma Chester, is also supportive of this theory, not because she has any evidence, but simply because things just don't make sense. And she said, quote, "Seriously, these were responsible men. How do they go in a backyard and freeze to death? All 3 of them. Something that comes to my mind, this guy," speaking of Jordan Willis, "wants to brag about how smart he is. He's a scientist. My thoughts are that he concocted something and gave it to all 3 men," end quote. Both John Paserno, Jordan's lawyer, and Jordan's father have scoffed at this theory, with Paserno saying, quote, "That's ridiculous. He's a scientist and he's somehow to blame. That's an opinion not based on fact. There's no allegation of any animosity between Jordan and his 3 friends. People want to speculate, but it's not like anyone ever called the police saying, 'We're afraid of this Jordan guy.' I understand that people are hurting, but that's not an excuse to throw baseless accusations at Jordan," end quote. Jordan's father also chimed in saying, quote, "He would never in a million years do anything. These were all good friends of his. These were all people he went to school with, and he took them to a football game the day before the Chiefs. They could have gone out there. It was icy and cold that night. I don't know how many cars they came in. There were 3 of them, and there were only 2 cars left on the street. They could have decided they wanted to go back inside his house for some reason. People leave the house all the time without coats. It doesn't matter how cold it is. Jordan doesn't know what happened to them, and he never saw them again at the point that they were walking towards the front door and leaving his house," end quote. And that is another thing, right? The 2 cars on the street outside of Jordan's house. We remember John Paserno said that Jordan knew they were there. These cars were visible. Even the neighbor across the street said he saw them there for a few days and he noticed them because they weren't usually there. And according to John Paserno, Jordan did notice the cars were still there, but he thought nothing of it because it wasn't unusual for his friends to park their vehicles on his street overnight. But that means that at some point in that 48 hours when Jordan was sleeping and drinking wine solo, he did look outside. He looked out the front, at least. But he never looked out into the backyard at all. Not when he was filling his wine glass with water in the kitchen sink, maybe, right? Not when he was pouring water from the refrigerator into his wine glass. Not when he was opening his solo wine bottle. He never looked outside. Now, there was some snowfall, but reportedly not enough to completely conceal the bodies of 3 men-sized objects scattered about the patio and backyard. It's just very hard to believe. Now, let's get back to the speculation of drug use, because in my opinion, it is the most likely scenario. And when I say that, I mean it's very probable drugs were involved in some way, shape, or form. Because yes, 3 men don't just walk outside and then freeze to death without making any calls for help, without trying to get back into Jordan's house, or without at least going to sit in their cars. Something had to have incapacitated them enough so that saving themselves from the cold was not possible. Something had to have been ingested that may have made these 3 men drowsy. Maybe it made them fall asleep. Maybe it affected their bodies in ways that they were unaware hypothermia was setting in. It is not uncommon for this to happen. For instance, the case of Michael Wamsley and Janelle Hornickel comes to mind. This couple was lost in a snowstorm in Nebraska. They were just 2 miles away from their truck, and they froze to death with meth in their systems. The toxicologist believed that the drugs could have impaired their judgment because neither Michael nor Janelle were dressed properly for the weather. And meth has a tendency to make you feel hot. So if you're using meth and you're like, oh, I'm hot, let me go outside and cool down, you're not going to put a coat on. You're not going to make sure that you're, dressed for the elements. Hypothermia can also make you feel hot, which is why so many victims of it are often found in a state of undress. Hypothermia occurs when the body loses heat faster than it can produce heat, and this leads to a dangerously low body temperature. When your body temperature drops, your heart, nervous system, and other organs can't work normally. And if left untreated, hypothermia can lead to a complete failure of both the heart and respiratory system, which obviously and eventually leads to death. Now, someone with hypothermia is not usually aware of their condition because the symptoms are so gradual, starting with shivering, followed by slow, shallow breathing, a weak pulse, slurred speech or mumbling, and then drowsiness, low energy, confusion, and memory loss, and then eventually a loss of consciousness. The confused thinking associated with hypothermia often prevents self-awareness, and it can also lead to risk-taking behavior, like going outside when it's cold, when you're not properly dressed, or in the case of someone like Kanika Jenkins, wandering around a hotel and ending up in a walk-in freezer and closing that door behind you. Things that you wouldn't normally do if you were in your right mind. And there are some drugs that, if ingested, can make hypothermia worse because the substances change the body's ability to regulate its temperature. These drugs include certain antidepressants, antipsychotics, sedatives, and narcotic pain medication. And that makes me think about a drug that has been in the news quite a bit lately because it seems to be showing up everywhere: fentanyl. Fentanyl is a synthetic opioid that is up to 50 times stronger than heroin and 100 times stronger than morphine. So it's very easy to overdose on it. And a lot of people have been lately. It's easy to overdose on fentanyl even if it's prescribed in a medical setting and you just abuse it. However, most recent cases of fentanyl-related overdoses are linked to illegally made fentanyl. And the powder is often mixed with other drugs like heroin, cocaine, or meth. The powder is also used to make pills that look like other prescription opioids like OxyContin. Many times people are taking a substance and maybe they're taking, another drug, maybe they're doing coke, and they're completely unaware that it's mixed with fentanyl. Drugs may contain deadly levels of fentanyl, and you wouldn't be able to see it, taste it, or smell it. You would have no idea. Not only do opioids like fentanyl make it harder to regulate body temperature, but they also slow respiration. According to the DEA, fentanyl is the single deadliest drug threat that our nation has ever encountered. Fentanyl is everywhere, from large metropolitan areas to rural America, and the DEA says no community is safe from this poison. In 2023, the DEA seized more than 78.4 million fentanyl-laced fake pills and nearly 12,000 pounds of fentanyl powder. These seizures are equivalent to more than 388.8 million lethal doses of fentanyl. And already in 2024, the DEA has seized over 11.2 million deadly doses of the drug. It's literally only January. Like, it's going to be February and you see this, but we're a month in to 2024. And they've already seized over 11 million deadly doses of fentanyl. That's concerning. The DEA website also claims that prior to 2019, the People's Republic of China was the primary source of illicit fentanyl in the United States, but in recent years, the drug seems to be coming into the country in massive amounts from Mexico. However, the criminal organizations in Mexico are using primarily China-sourced materials, right? So China is still helping, which is so great of them. Thanks, guys. We really appreciate the opioid crisis. And it's really sad, honestly. A lot of people are dying from fentanyl. I know people and know of people who have died from fentanyl overdoses. And some of them were because they didn't know the drugs they were taking had fentanyl in them. Some of them came from developing a tolerance to fentanyl and having to take more and more and more, and then eventually overdosing. But it's a very, very scary drug. It is very damaging. You have people dying and you hear like 11 million deadly doses and 300 million deadly doses. You have to put faces to those doses, faces of brothers, daughters, husbands, wives, children. People are losing family members and loved ones every single day in high numbers because of fentanyl. So, is it possible that Ricky Johnson, Clayton McGeeney, and David Harrington took some sort of recreational drug, not knowing it had fentanyl in it? Or did they knowingly take fentanyl or use fentanyl, not knowing the effect it would have on them? It's possible that Jordan Willis also used the same drug, which might explain why he slept for 2 damn days straight. But he was sleeping in a nice warm house while his friends froze outside. Maybe all the men did use some sort of drug, and maybe Jordan did go to bed, leaving his friends to hang out and play video games, and because they were on some sort of drug and they weren't thinking properly and they didn't have a level of self-awareness and they were going to participate in risky behavior, the friends went outside and they were hanging out on the patio and they all fell asleep due to the drug effects and then froze to death. That is possible, although it's still weird because why was one of the men on the front porch and the other two in the yard? What were they doing in the yard? If they were all sitting on the porch together, it would make a little bit more sense, but what were they doing in the yard? 2 of the men in the yard. Why? It's also possible that Jordan was the one who supplied the drugs, and so he's very worried about being held responsible in some way for these deaths. The theory that these 3 men took something that didn't react well and they were dragged outside because Jordan didn't want to get in trouble, it is also possible. You know, I'm not going to say it's a completely crazy theory. I'm not saying it happened. I'm just saying it's possible. Some people have said that, and it is possible. Let's say that there was some kind of overdose and Jordan panicked, so he began to drag his friends outside so he could claim ignorance and hide away from any questions for 2 days. Maybe he dragged 2 of the men out to the yard, but then he couldn't get the last one out there because he was so tired and winded, so he left this last man on the patio. And that was David Harrington, by the way, who was found on the patio. I just wanted to check my notes. It's possible. I'm not saying it happened, and I think it's far more likely that these men walked outside under the influence of something and then just didn't realize that hypothermia was setting in until it was too late, and then they just fell asleep, like their respiration went down, their body temperature went down, they just sort of went into like a deep sleep and then froze to death. But it's crazy, like all 3 at the same time, and none of them realized anything was happening. None of them were like, we feel weird. Maybe we should go back inside. We haven't heard from Jordan whether that sliding glass door that led out to the backyard was unlocked or locked. That would be important, you know? That would be important. We've had all this talk about, front door was used. Did you walk him to the front door? Did you see him go out the front door, et cetera, et cetera? But we haven't had any talk about whether that back door that led to the patio was locked or unlocked. And I would be interested to know what the status of the lock on the door was. Was it unlocked? If it was unlocked, why didn't they just come back inside? It's weird. It's just all weird. So Dr. Caleb Alexander, he's an epidemiologist with Johns Hopkins University. He says it's plausible that all three men had been exposed to some kind of drug. He said, quote, "It's one thing for a person to tragically end up in a snowdrift after leaving a bar, but it's a completely different story for three people to end up dead sitting on somebody's back porch after a party. The fact that there's three individuals really heightens the curiosity and tragedy of the case, and I think increases the likelihood that something more than moderate amounts of alcohol were at play here." End quote. Dr. Alexander believes that what happened is likely the result of a dangerous combination of opioid-like drugs and alcohol to which the three men could have intentionally or unintentionally been exposed to. He said, quote, "There are dozens of potential prescription drugs that, when combined with alcohol, would cause a level of sedation that would ultimately lead to freezing to death. One of the many tragedies of the opioid epidemic is that all too often people overdose, and it can happen easily in groups as well as when people are solo." End quote. During the 2 days that these men were missing, temperatures were in the 30s, and Dr. Alexander said that if they were outside in that weather and they weren't moving around for an extended period of time, they would be in serious danger of death. Quote, "When you're just sitting there, you are not generating any body heat. That's darn cold. Plenty cold enough to die in. Let's just put it that way." End quote. And because fentanyl is synthetic, meaning man-made, and because Jordan is a scientist with a PhD, some have wondered, maybe Jordan decided to make his own batch of fentanyl and share it with his friends. You know, he's good with biology and chemistry, and he can create things. He has a PhD, he's a scientist. He does experiments and things like that. Maybe that did happen, but then it went very wrong, and he was the only one who survived. Only time and the results of the toxicology tests will tell us what was in the bodies of these three men when they mysteriously all died at the same time, sitting in the backyard of a friend in a suburban neighborhood, unfound and unseen for 2 days. Now, according to attorney John Paserno, his client Jordan Willis is not only devastated by the loss of his friends, but depressed because of all these allegations being made against him. Someone close to the Willis family said, quote, "He didn't get to say goodbye or go to their funerals due to the circumstances of these wild speculations and accusations. No one seems to be willing to wait for the results of the toxicology report or wait for any other facts from the police department for a case that is still under investigation to make these speculations." End quote. And I agree there. I don't like when everybody jumps on the bandwagon and they're all like, this guy's guilty. That is not happening in this case because I've done my research. I've been on the Reddit threads. There's a lot of people who are like, no, this was obviously drugs, and it's totally understandable how he didn't see them out there for 2 days, if he was sleeping, if his blinds were drawn, you know, if he was sleeping off something like, you know, drug use or heavy alcohol use, yeah, he would have been out of it, and we can completely understand why he didn't see them, and this is just an accident. There's a lot of people, and I would say it's like split 50-50, that are like, we don't even see the big deal here. Why is everybody making a big deal? The media has been really on this case. They've really been having everybody on. They're just trying to get more information. They do seem to believe that there's something else going on here. However, I will say it's not really fair or accurate to call these wild speculations because, you know, somebody like me, I'm not out here saying Jordan's a murderer. I'm not out here saying Jordan's 100% guilty. I'm out here saying it feels weird. It doesn't feel completely cut and dry. It doesn't feel completely smoothed out. There's things here that are jutting out and bringing attention to the inconsistencies and the irregularities in this case that are causing some people to have an instinct of like, well, we'll wait and see, but this doesn't feel completely right. And that's where I'm at. And now I want to know where you're at. But before I find out where you're at, I want to see if there's anything new that's popped up in this case since yesterday, because there is stuff coming out like every other minute. Oh, damn. There is something new. There is something new. Okay, so this is from the New York Post, and it says Kansas City Chiefs fan who hosted watch party where 3 friends froze to death checks into rehab. You see what I mean about the inconsistencies of the reporting, though? He's hosting a watch party in this article that came out 2 hours ago, when the timeline generally has been accepted that the friends weren't there until after the game. But there's a lot of media outlets saying that Jordan hosted this watch party that the friends were at. So it's like, What's the truth here? All right, so the article says Jordan Willis, 38, is facing his addiction head on, a source close to the family told Fox News Digital, calling the deaths of his friends an enormous wake-up call. Quote, after the shocking loss of 3 of his close friends under extremely tragic circumstances, Jordan recognized that he had a problem with addiction. The source said, without elaborating on the exact nature. He immediately checked himself into rehab after vacating his home and putting his things into storage. So what this looks like here is that there were drugs involved. And literally, this came out 2 hours ago. There were drugs involved. And now I feel so good because I kind of pinned it. I kind of pinned it on the whole fentanyl thing because listen to this. Alex Weimer Lee, remember he was the guy who came at 7 and then left around midnight? He is alleged to have texted other friends about drug use at Willis's house during the watch party. And experts have indicated that alcohol or drugs like fentanyl or a related analog could have caused the men to pass out in the snow and succumb to the 30-degree weather. This article also says that 2 of the men who arrived to Willis's house on January 7th were seen each with a 30-pack of beer. So we've got drugs, we've got alcohol, we've got cold temperatures, we've got a bad combination here. So reading the comments under this article is very interesting because some people are like, yeah, we thought it had something to do with drugs. Other people are like, oh, how convenient Jordan Willis is checking into rehab while, you know, an investigation is happening into 3 deaths that happened at his home while he was the only one that survived. He's doing what his lawyer told him to do and basically escape and go to rehab, which is going to be like a multi-week thing so that he's out of the public eye and maybe not available for police questioning and things like that. So that is interesting. I don't know what the motives are, but if Jordan Willis does have an active drug addiction and it's causing problems in his life, I'm glad he's getting help because he seems like a brilliant man. Just reading his interview, he seems brilliant. He knows his shit. He's got a PhD. He seems to be working on this HIV vaccine that's going to make the world better. So if he has a problem, I hope that he gets it fixed. But yeah, it's concerning because if there was drug use that happened at that house, he could be held responsible for, not taking care of the people that were in his house and kind of letting them wander about. I still think it's weird that they all 3 went outside, froze to death. 2 of them were in the yard. How the hell did you get there? What were you doing there in the yard? Weird. And Jordan did not see them for 2 days. But if he was messed up on fentanyl or something like that, he may have slept for 2 days. He may have slept for 2 days and not seen them at all. I don't know at this point. It's crazy. Let me know what you think about this all in the comment section. Now, I'm not doing a small business shout out today because I'm not prepared, but I did want to remind everybody about Stephanie's Small Business Showcase, which is where I choose each episode or each video. I choose one of your small businesses to shine a light on, to showcase, to tell people about so that we can support each other, so that anybody who's, trying to get their business off the ground can get more eyes on it. So if you would like to be included in that and you haven't emailed me yet, email me at stephanieharlowe at stephanieharlowe.com. Use the words small business showcase in the subject line and then tell me about your small business in the body of the email and any links that you would like me to include in the description box. Okay, I'm not able to talk anymore, so I think it's time to end this. Don't forget to like this video if you liked it. Share it if you think it's worth sharing. Subscribe if you haven't already. My thoughts go out to the friends and the families of these 3 men who tragically and suddenly died. Many of these men have children. Many of these men have families that they were providing for. They had lives. They had people that loved them, and now they're gone. And I highly suspect that when the toxicology report comes back, we're going to have a lot more answers, and we're going to see that there was some substances in their body and they died from hypothermia. But that's not going to answer all of our questions, especially not about Jordan Willis. So let me know what you think in the comments. Like, share, subscribe, and stay tuned for more great true crime videos coming your way this month. But until then, I love you so much, and I'll see you very soon. Bye.
Straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're coming back from the grave, calling out my name, better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly. so you got to let it go. I got blood on the strings.